You're not broken. Your brain just operates on a frequency that 99% of people can't understand. Have you ever wondered why you always feel out of place in a crowd? Why normal conversations leave you feeling empty? Why you notice things no one else seems to see? Emotions hidden behind words, invisible connections between events, or the darkness hiding in someone's smile. No, you're not too sensitive. And no, you're not overthinking. You're simply operating with a rare kind of mind, one that Carl Jung called a gateway between consciousness and the unconscious. And if you truly grasp what that means, it won't just change how you see the world, it'll change how you see yourself. Right now, I'm going to show you 8 signs that prove you're not different, you were born to lead. And sign number 7 might bring you to tears, but it's also the moment you reclaim the power that's been buried for far too long. It's time to remember who you are. 1. You've always felt misunderstood, but it was never your fault. Do you remember the first time in your life you felt out of place, not lost in space, but lost in the very conversation happening around you? Everyone else laughing, chatting about what they called normal things while you stood there trying to sync with them, but feeling hollow inside. You shared a thought deep intuitive, but what you got back was a blank stare, or worse, an awkward smirk. And that's when you learned your first lesson. Staying silent is safer. Then you started to doubt yourself. Maybe you were too complicated, too sensitive, or maybe just broken. No, there's nothing wrong with you. It's the world that hasn't caught up with how your mind works. Carl Jung called this psychological loneliness, the isolation experienced by rare minds when you see life like a symphony, while most only hear scattered notes. You sense things others can't. You read the second, third layers in every action, every word. When someone says, "I'm fine," you hear a scream choked back. When others talk excitedly, you catch the exhaustion behind their smile. And each time you're reminded again that you're alone. But listen to me once and for all. You're not broken. You're not too much. You're simply operating at a higher level of awareness. And that's not a burden, it's a gift. The problem is, this society wasn't designed for minds like yours. It rewards clarity, sameness, obedience. But you see what they're not ready to face, and that makes you too intense, too deep, too different. But what the world calls different, Jung called potential, not yet awakened. You don't have to change to fit them. It's the world that needs you to stay exactly as you are, to lead, to pierce through illusion, to speak the truth no one else dares to name. You're not alone because you're broken. You're alone because you're rare. And rare things are always feared until they're needed. So if you've spent your life misunderstood, labeled too much, or forced to shrink so others could feel comfortable, it's time to reclaim your space. Because next you'll understand why your mind isn't just different, it's a reality decoding machine most people don't even know exists. 2. Your mind maps reality in patterns. Not events. Most people live through disjointed slices of the present. They remember events, dates, words, like puzzle pieces that never really fit. But you don't see fragments. You see systems, patterns, rhythm. You don't just see what's happening. You sense why it's happening, where it came from, and where it's headed. You walk into a room and immediately know who's being real and who's hiding something. No evidence, no reason. You just know. It's not vague intuition. It's an invisible data system, fast, deep, unnervingly precise, running silently through your subconscious. Carl Jung called it introverted intuition. A form of perception that doesn't need explanation, doesn't require data, it only needs truth. And here's what makes your mind incomprehensible to the masses. They need everything to follow a clear order from A to B to C. You get from A to Z in a single heartbeat. And when you share something that's crystal clear to you, they look confused, lost, or worse, accuse you of making it up. Too many times you've had to explain again something your intuition had already resolved. Too many times you were mocked, doubted, or excluded, simply because you saw what others weren't ready to face. And the most painful part, sometimes you started doubting yourself too. But let me remind you, you're not wrong. You're seeing the full map when others are still fumbling for street signs. Your mind doesn't operate in a straight line. It moves in waves. It doesn't wait for the world to conclude it, listens to the resonance beneath events. You don't need something to happen to see it. You've already seen it before it began. It's not illusion. It's your ability to read the patterns of reality. And to Jung, that's a sign of a mind tapping into the collective unconscious, the deepest layer of human awareness. You're not just a witness. You're a constructor of perception, and while the world is still scrambling to ask what's happening, you're already answering the deeper question, why is it happening, and what does it reveal about who we really are? 3. You see through the beautiful lie. And it hurts. The problem is, once those invisible connections are seen, you can't pretend they don't exist. You can't go back to the state of collective ignorance, where people only care about what's said, not what's happening beneath the mask. You see the artifice in the smile. You hear the insecurity in the overly confident tone. You feel the fear in an eye trying to control another. Not because you want to, but because you can't help seeing. Beauty often lives on the surface, but truth lives in the darkness. And somehow you're always pulled toward that darkness like an addiction. Not because you crave pain, but because you cannot live in a world of pretense. Carl Jung called this the capacity to access the active unconscious. When most people only live within the mask they build to be accepted, you see right through it. You don't just see someone lying. You understand why they lie. You feel the fear behind their control. You recognize the unhealed wounds behind defensive behavior. This is where it becomes painful. Because when you see too much, you also endure too much. You can no longer remain carefree. You cannot enter a conversation without reading 3 hidden layers beneath every sentence. And that makes you dangerous in the eyes of others. Not because you threaten them, but because you illuminate the darkness they've spent a lifetime bearing. So they hate you, or rather they hate the feeling of being seen when standing before you. Even when your mouth is silent, even when you're only present in truth, the more you understand, the lonelier you become. But you can't go back, because in this world there are 2 types of people, those who continue living in pretense just to be accepted, and those who dare to look straight at the truth, no matter how painful it is. You belong to the second group, and if your heart is tired from seeing too much feeling too deeply, then keep going. Because that very sensitivity is what will save you from manipulation, from toxic relationships, from the very mask you once wore to survive. 4. You're drawn to darkness, not out of morbidity, but meaning. Not everyone has the courage to look into the darkness within themselves, but some people at their core are always drawn to it. Not because of instability or negativity, but because in that deepest darkness, something authentic and raw can be felt. Perhaps since childhood, cheerful stories or the promises of everything will be okay have never been enough. Fake optimism, rigid morals, hollow reassurance, they only push the truth further away. Meanwhile, raw emotions and unresolved shadows awaken the heart. Jung once said, "No one can be enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And that's what deep minds pursue: true understanding, not to judge, but to decode. Not simply knowing what people do, but why they do it, motivations, wounds, defenses, the parts society rejects. Living in that depth means you can't pretend anymore. Whether facing a polite smile from a stranger or within a close relationship, those with strong intuition always see more, sometimes far more than the heart can bear. It's no surprise, then, to be drawn to criminal psychology, anti-heroes, or deep meditations on pain, death, truth, and humanity. Not out of a warped fascination, but because these subjects pose real questions, and real ones at that. Yet no one can dig into another soul without inadvertently excavating their own. Working with the world's shadow also means confronting your own. What was once buried hidden felt cracked to the core. Jung calls this shadow work, and it's not for those who want to play it safe. The truth is, witnessing darkness breeds loneliness. But precisely because of that ability to reach into the dark, there emerges a chance to step into the light, not the false light of social platitudes, but the light of awakening self-understanding and deep healing. A soul that steps through darkness, yet keeps its heart, that is true strength. 5. Logic is a tool, but you're the architect. There's one truth few admit: logic does not always lead to truth. This world exalts reason, praising those who think step by step, place everything in neat boxes. But that only works if everything in life is linear. Reality, however, flows in spirals, overlaps, and paradoxes, and simple logic eventually meets its boundary. Some build their lives on formulas and data. Others, like you, are architects of perception. You use logic, but you also know when to bypass it. Carl Jung called this intuitive logic, a kind of thinking not shackled by if A, then B. It lets a person grasp the whole picture from just a few threads. While others debate what to do first, the intuitive mind already knows the route and the exit. The truth is, you don't reject logic. You value it deeply, but only as a tool, not a deity. People around you often don't get this. They want proof process reasons laid out clearly. But some depths cannot be charted in graphs, they can only be felt by a soul that has passed through them. You've been labeled emotional, vague, even illogical. Yet the paradox is, it's often those supposedly emotional decisions that are right, and no one knows why, except you. That's because you don't just think with your head, you feel with your entire nervous system. You read the atmosphere, sense shifts in the narrative sense. When something is off, even when all evidence says fine. Countless times those lightning-fast intuitive responses saved you from major trouble or exposed subtle manipulation invisible to others. And when the truth came out, people were stunned. How did you know? There's one answer: knowing was enough, because this mind doesn't need to explain everything. Jung believed this multi-layered thinking marks a high integration of consciousness and unconscious, a form of spiritual intelligence that's not only smart, but deeply discerning. Believe this, you're not thinking wrong. You're operating on an OS no one else is equipped to run. And while the world messes with its equations, you've already rewritten the blueprint. 6. You carry existential weight. Others avoid. There are moments in the middle of a crowded party when a massive void opens up in your mind. Everyone else is laughing, talking about trivial things, while you only hear one question echoing in your head. Am I really living? Not everyone understands the exhaustion of living in a world that cares only about surface things that are easy to digest, easy to measure, easy to post on social media. Yet some people like you can't stop searching for real meaning behind every experience, behind a gaze, a pain, a day that passes without leaving anything but a silence clutching at the chest. Carl Jung called this existential orientation, a psychological structure in which a person cannot live without questioning existence. Not just what should I do to succeed, but why do I exist? Does any of this actually matter? And that question never lets go middle of the night, even when everything seems fine. Others avoid loneliness with busy schedules. Yet you, even in a crowd, can feel like you're broadcasting from another planet. Not because no one is around, but because no one is speaking about what truly matters. Existential loneliness is not about lacking people, it's about lacking depth. Lacking a presence that truly listens, a connection that isn't shallow, a conversation in which you don't have to pretend. And here lies the greatest paradox: the deeper you go, the harder it is to find someone to share it with. Easy relationships rarely have the capacity to hold a mind burdened with presence, where everything is felt with the soul, not just politeness. How many times have you wondered if something is wrong with you, when what pleases others leaves you feeling empty? But the truth is, precisely because you refuse to live superficially, you are the one living authentically. Jung believed this kind of loneliness isn't abnormal. It's a sign of spiritual growth when the soul begins craving something beyond fame, money, or approval. You weren't born to follow a preset script. You came here to question it. And even if that journey sometimes feels too heavy, it's also the only path that leads to wholeness. After all, what's more worth living than a life with real meaning? 7. The curse of high empathy. You know what people won't admit? Not everyone sees the sadness hidden behind a smiling eye. Not everyone notices a voice that slows down because of an unhealed wound. And few can hear the despair in a joke that seems harmless. But you can. Even if people don't speak, even if they hide it well, not because of superpowers, but simply because of an overly sensitive detection system, always on scanning layers of emotional frequencies most people don't notice. Empathy at that level isn't just understanding emotions, it's becoming someone else's emotion. Jung called this instinctive empathy with the collective unconscious, when a mind not only reads external energy, but reflects it inward, involuntarily, and uncontrollably. The result, you become the person everyone wants to tell things to, but no one ever asks, do you have the capacity to listen? You become the fixer, the rescuer, the one who unravels, while having no one to lean on. Because when you're always the understander, it's hard to be truly understood in return. Worse, excessive empathy starts erasing personal boundaries. You no longer know which feelings are yours and which are borrowed from others. You just feel tired, empty, drained. Every social interaction can feel like an emotional battleground where you have to fight not to be pulled under by what others haven't voiced yet. But what hurts most isn't other people's pain, it's their pretense. Knowing the other person is hiding something hurting, wanting to be seen but choosing to act all good because they're afraid of being seen. And when you try to connect, they withdraw because they can't handle your unfiltered truth. Empathy without healthy boundaries becomes a curse. It turns the seemingly strong into silent victims of their own gift. But remember this, knowing too much isn't your fault. The issue isn't feeling, it's protecting that feeling from being distorted, exploited, or weaponized. Jung believed those with high emotional intelligence are guardians of the human soul, but before they save anyone else, they must learn not to lose themselves. Empathy is a gift. Boundaries are the wrapping. And when placed wisely, emotion stops being a weakness, it becomes strength. 8. You don't want to fit in. You want to transform. There's a moment in life, quiet and tense, when pretense no longer saves you. It's not just about feeling different, but realizing you were never meant to blend in. Not here to please, not here to replicate society's common denominator. You're here to dismantle, to deconstruct, to rebuild starting from within. Carl Jung called this individuation, the process of deconstructing the old ego, confronting the unconscious, integrating shadow and light, to become a genuine being untouched by expectations or trauma. Unlike mainstream self-development, where you try to become better inside a pre-made box, transformation is about radical rebirth, where the old must die for the new to live, a spiritual path where the soul is tested in order to awaken. Many choose the easier path, adapt to fit and act correctly, slide neatly into titled boxes. But for some, the tighter the mold, the louder the heart screams. You can't settle for fine. You can't live if the true self is being crushed. You can't pretend everything is stable when your soul is shouting, "This isn't me." And that's where the breakthrough begins. Maybe a breakup that shatters your world, a job loss, a psychological collapse, a night sleepless because your soul is trembling. And then from the ashes, something sprouts. Not a new you, but an entirely different entity, conscious, deep free. This process isn't glamorous. It isn't easy. It demands confronting hidden parts of yourself. Locked away memories, truths too painful to face. But when you walk out of that fire, you are no longer a victim of your history, no longer a product of trauma or doctrine. You become someone who writes your own life story, not with words taught by others, but with the voice of your own soul. And that transformation, that's why you always felt out of place. Because you weren't born to belong, you were born to transcend. No one can stop a soul that's truly evolving. And if you're reading this, maybe the journey is waiting for you to step forward. Not to blend in, but to become yourself for once and forever. 9. Why the world needs your mind, but will resist it. There's no shortage of smart people in this world, but there is a scarcity of minds that can look deeply deep enough to see what no one else has seen, brave enough to speak what others only dare to think. You are one of those. Your mind can dissect a statement to understand the emotion behind it, see the psychological system hidden beneath human behavior, and sense subtle movements others overlook. What people call a weird intuition is actually the ability to access the underlying collective unconscious, what Jung described as a language never spoken aloud, but always understood by the soul. And because of that, you will meet resistance. The truth is, the world doesn't want to be unsettled. It loves stability, control, and things that are easy to digest. And you're the disruptor of that comfort zone. Every time you point out a hard truth, you make someone uncomfortable. Every time you refuse to follow the status quo, you force those around you to question their own choices. Every time you live authentically, you inadvertently become a mirror to the illusions they've been holding on to. The world needs light, but it fears the one holding the torch. And you, with all of your depth, sensitivity, honesty, and intuition, are that torch. You may have been labeled too sensitive, too extreme complex, or hard to understand. That's not truth. It's a defensive reaction from minds not yet mature enough to receive you. There's nothing wrong if you're met with resistance. It only means you're touching something real. Jung once said, "The world will ask who you think you are, and if you don't answer, it will tell you, and you will live under its script." Don't let this world write your story for you. Don't shrink just because people aren't ready. Don't dim your essence just to blend in. Minds like yours weren't born to stay silent, not to justify deviation, not to prop up decaying systems. You were born to be a catalyst, an arm reaching out to pull others from the darkness, a door opening into depths no one else dared enter. The world will resist you, but that is proof that it needs you now more than ever. 10. This is your call to rise, not as a victim, but as a channel. Some carry a mind so deep, so sensitive, so different, that their lives are treated as anomalies. They hide their intuition to avoid being labeled dreamy. They shrink back from being sidelined. They try to fit in even as their soul shouts they were born to stand out. If you've ever been that person, then this call is for you. It's time to lift your head and face the truth. You are not a victim. You are a channel between the world of consciousness and the depths of the soul. A channel of light, not the false light used to escape darkness, but the light forged from the very darkness you survived. Every hurt you've endured, rejection, misunderstanding, judgment, exclusion, is not a sign of inadequacy. It's a ritual of rebirth, a purification that preserves only what's real: courage, authenticity, and unbreakable self. The world doesn't need more people living mechanically. It needs those who dare to live deeply, live truthfully, and claim their own light. Carl Jung wrote, "The greatest privilege in life is to become oneself. But to reach it, you must step out of victimhood. Stop repeating what once brought you down and start telling how you rose. Stop living in the wound and live as proof that the wound forged your strength." Awakening doesn't come from knowing more concepts. It comes when you dare to look in the mirror and say, "I don't need anyone's approval to know my worth." When you stop waiting for someone else to validate your truth. And if you've made it this far and your soul is still quietly nodding, then it's no accident. This is an invitation, a call from the deepest part within, a wake-up shout for a flame bearer who's lived too long in the shadows. You are not alone. You are not lost. You are standing at the true beginning of a journey where awakening is not a choice, but a mission. The question now isn't, am I different? It's, what will I do with this difference, to hide or to rise? And if rising is your answer, then welcome. Because from this moment, you no longer exist to please others. You exist as a channel, a reminder, a spark. And the world needs that spark more than ever. If anything in this video resonated, if your heart skipped a beat, realizing someone truly understands, leave a comment below. It doesn't need to be long, just honest. Each story shared becomes a beacon helping other lost minds realize they're not alone. And if this journey feels like yours, hit subscribe, not just to follow a YouTube channel, but to remind yourself I've begun stepping out of the darkness. Welcome to the community of those brave enough to awaken. The journey ahead is long, and we'll walk it together.